Welcome back to A Plus Parents, everyone. And okay, let's go a little international today. So, which is kind of fun because I'm actually not quite in the US right now, and our guest today is not in the US, but we're all from the US. So, kind of fun how this works and what's possible in the world of homeschooling. So, with me today is Shannan Swindler. And Shannan, this is really great. So, I always tell people, I'm like a classroom in the box when I go through the airport. I pull out my laptops and here we go.
Yeah.
Shannan has this cool motto, right? It's have
Yeah.
passport, will travel. So
Yeah.
I love that. So she picks up, as long as she's got her travel itinerary and she's got a couple of lesson plans with her, it's homeschooling. And here we go. Right.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
and she says she does it like she packs her carry-on. So it's like exciting and on budget, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
So she started in 1995 coming to Europe. And so several trips back and forth into Europe. She has in and she lives in Scotland now. She does her homeschooling from Scotland. She's been there for a while. So we'll have her tell her story about how she got there and what that looks like for her. But really, it's like giving her the opportunity. And so her website, I'll tell you her website because it ties exactly into what we're looking at today. It's captivatingcompass.com. So you'll see that in the show notes. You'll be able to navigate your way there, and you'll see some about her online classes that she has and some of her self-paced curriculum too. But for looking at like how do you homeschool from that worldview about, and when I say worldview, I mean seeing the world kind of view, like you're actually out in the world and seeing the world from the worldview, which is really awesome. So she says that being in Scotland, she gets to travel with her favorite travel buddy and her two travel apprentices. So I just love that. I think that's great. So dark chocolate, fresh coffee, has to be right. Red wine, thoughtful conversation. You sound European. That's all I'm going to say. Right. So, really looking at that, how you get all the, looking at how many stamps you have in your passport. I know mine, the last time I went through customs, they looked at mine and the guy just looked at me really funny because he's running out of room where to stamp it. I have to renew mine next year. So fortunately, I hope it's in time before they run out of place to stamp it. Right. But, and here's what's great. If you're not doing lessons, you're outside, right? And you're out in nature, gather. You said you like to gather berries, herbs, and mushrooms, right? Which is really awesome.
Yes.
And then it actually leads to what's next in your next, science classes, art classes, whatever that looks like. Here's what's really cool too, because you've started homeschool co-ops. So I'm going to ask you about that too, but you attend conferences, you've got curriculum that you've created, you teach online, and you work with, and it's really great because we just had Lisa Nearing on, I think the episode right before yours when we put this up, right? And so you work with the True North program as well. So really great. But you're a world geography and life skills. That is your expertise. So it's really great. Really about just helping families, discover for themselves, like, what is it? How do you use the world as your classroom? So you can do it for homeschooling, traveling, just learning together. So first of all, Shannan, welcome to A Plus Parents. I'm super excited to have you be here. And tell us, let's start with this, because we'll come back and we're going to tell everybody about how to find you on Facebook. Oh, by the way, so I'm going to tell you, I'll tell you now, we'll tell you again later. So, and you'll find it in the show notes. So there's captivatingcompass.com is the website with the blog. And then if you want to find Shannan's social media, it's Captive8, the number 8 compass. So captive, but you leave the E off. So it's CAPTIV, the number 8, and then compass. So, and I'll have her tell you the story because I asked her before we started to record, why are they different, right? So we'll make sure we come back to do. But let's first start with this. So Shannan, here you are now, you're homeschooling and you've done it and you've, been able to live internationally now as well and still homeschool. So what got you started? Like, how did you decide to start homeschooling in the first place?
Well, Dennis, we are one of those families that never thought we would home educate. As they say here, home educate, homeschool. When we lived in the States, we always had a passion from those early 1995 trips before we were parents, that after a couple of trips, we really had this passion of wanting to raise our kids overseas if we had kids, and if that was what would work out with our life. And so we ended up having kids, and then it was still there, but we didn't know how it was going to play out, right? And I put my youngest in preschool, we put her into kindergarten and put her into first grade. And in kindergarten, she was identified as TAG, so talented and gifted, which was a really young age for that, to pick up on that, but they did. And so that was interesting information to have, because I was being challenged at home with how to keep her inspired and curious and all those things and not bored. And now I could see that happening at school. And so we were working with the school on that. And then she ended up getting kind of sick, really sick one winter. And so sick that we had to withdraw her from school because she'd been gone too long. And so we brought her home. And I wasn't going to put her back in school just to keep her on the rolls, go for half a day every 2 weeks or whatever like that. And so we ended up doing a charter school, online charter school for the rest of that year, with the thought that in the fall, she'll go back, right? And as we were going through getting better and doing online charter school, I started talking with some longtime friends of mine, and looking at their kids, just kind of from an outside view, and saying, and then asking, how did you get that? How did you get such a respectful kid that is curious and will stop and ask the questions? And how did you, all these kind of things? Because I had a kid that was asking questions and was curious, but we were kind of in a really tough spot with the illness and everything. So that summer, we ended up realizing that homeschooling was going to be the place for us, for her. And that was fine, just with some other things that were going on that we identified. Kind of a little bit of deschooling happened in that time that she was at home. And so we're like, okay, let's give it a go. So we did with her. With my son, we figured he would just go to school and that would be that. Until we found out that he had some medical things, that the playground was not going to be a safe place for him. And so physically, it would not take much to really injure him. So a little bit medical fragile for him, and a little bit high intellect need, a high curiosity in both of them, actually. And that's really typical of so many young kids, right? And so that's what we wanted to foster. And we realized we could do that, but that we needed a few helping hands, some friends to talk to and that kind of thing. But once we got going with it, it just opened the world up for both of us, for all of us, to really appreciate the opportunity to learn together and to do it at a pace that was doable for my kids, with their medical things going on and their, ferocious reading and, all the things that happen when you bring kids home and they end up in a place of kind of more relaxed style of going about learning and stuff.
That's awesome. Wow. What a great story. And so now you've got this idea in the back of your mind, heading back to Europe and being outside the US and, kind of always getting back there, right? So what's it like? So here you are, and you're home educating, in a country outside the US. How's that for you all?
Well, now it's great. When we first did it, when we first moved here, as the story goes, and the truth is, we sold everything, pretty much, almost everything, because I did think I had to take my youngest back for a few medical things, and that didn't end up happening. But we ended up basically moving with 8 suitcases and 8 carry-ons. 4 people, 8, and that was it. That was what we brought. And 2 of those suitcases were toys and curriculum. And so, because we had a few things that it was like we wanted to keep the routine, and we had always found in a lot of the hard spots in life for us with the medical things going on, that homeschooling and the routine of homeschooling was a really good constant for us when everything else was changing. And so we agreed that when we moved, we would continue to homeschool for the first year, or until we got settled into a house and a neighborhood and those kind of things. And then we would reevaluate. So we were still very much open to the ideas of moving back to the public school system, until we got here and we realized it really was just not going to be a good fit for us, in spite of all the cultural interesting things that you could encounter. We realized there was far more that we could encounter and enjoy at our own pace as a family, and enjoy it together. And so we just said, enough. We're going to be doing it our way. So, and that was that.
Oh, I love it. You know, what year did you guys make that move?
We moved in 2015.
That's so funny. That's the same year that we left Florida and came to Spain. So
Really?
isn't that
Wow.
funny? Yeah, it's
That's
funny.
so funny.
We might
Yeah,
have, yeah, we
it
might
was
have
the
waved at
year.
each other in the airport, right? That's a
Probably.
riot. Oh, that's a riot.
That's
And we did the
great.
same thing. Like we got rid of everything, sold everything off. And it's funny. Like I had not owned a car, you know, since 2015, and I'm so happy, right?
That's amazing. That's
It was
amazing.
really great, right? But we did this, you know, we told the kids, okay, well, you know, you guys, you get one check bag. So just pick your favorite stuff, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you know, so that was mostly toys, and we figured we'd get clothes when we got here. So
Yeah.
that was kind of how
Yeah.
that went. But yeah,
Well,
so
we were moving in February. And so we moved
okay.
in
Oh,
February to
yeah. So
Scotland,
that was
and
cool.
it was
Right.
so cold. It didn't, I mean, we
Right.
weren't from the South, but
Right.
even from where we were coming from, you know, it was still snowing in May. I remember
Wow.
having this, you got to be kidding me. No, Mother Nature, I'm sending you a memo. No more
Yeah,
snow.
right. Wow. Oh, that's so great. Oh, it's awesome though. But it is, I mean, it's really great what's possible, and just seeing, you
Yeah,
know,
it really
and I watch the
is.
same, and I watch what my kids are doing today, and it's like they couldn't do what they're doing today if we had continued to do what we were doing in the past. So just
Absolutely.
wasn't going to work. So
Absolutely.
you have an interesting use the word intentional, and I like this. So when you talk about being intentional in your homeschooling journey, what do you mean by that? 'Cause I love that word, and I think
Well,
intention
you know,
is something we don't do enough of.
it's true. And I guess it comes from from the philosophy that kind of everything counts, right? So be mindful of capturing that, whether it's for a transcript or just for the sake of learning, and being intentional with understanding your kids' passions. And I think that that's really the bigger part of it, is getting passionate about the why, both for the kids and their trajectory and what they want to learn and what they need to learn, but also just how you go about that. So whether you are using you know, like I'll just use my daughter as an example. From the youngest kindergarten age, she was really keen on Egyptian stuff, ancient history, really. And I'm like, absurdly so, you know? And so I was like, wow, you really like ancient history. Well, as we kept going through and feeding that passion with books and field trips and that kind of thing, she has just been accepted to a university here in Scotland for archaeology, which has been her
Wow.
passion the whole time. And
Oh my
so,
gosh.
and it's one of those things, like you just said, if we had been in the US, that this opportunity for her would not likely have presented itself the way it has here.
Right.
And so, but in that, we have been intentional with our trips that we've taken to Italy. We've been intentional, you know, we would go for multifaceted purposes. So there was one trip we took the kids on to Italy, where we were working with a ministry group there during the days. And then on our off days, because we would have designated, you know, days off type of thing, we were going to museums. Everybody else was doing the boat tour and the whatever, you know, whatever the other things were, the cheese tour. And we were going to the museums. We went to the archaeology museum. We went to Herculano or Herculaneum. And because so that she could and we could experience the archaeology together, and that kind of thing. And so that really counted. That was intentional planning to visit locations, learn about them in advance, and then after the fact as well, but really get, you know, really up close and personal and touchy-feely, if you will, with it.
Right. That's so great.
So
Oh, it's great.
yeah,
You know, it's like, and you've got, you know, in Europe, it's easy because you can kind of move around and be in different
it
places.
is.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's super cool. Oh, that's great. So if you're, you know, looking at as a parent, right? Because you use the world as your classroom. I mean, it is just so great.
Yeah.
You're intentional about what you're doing. So, you know, as a parent, so we, you know, we hear all the time about how our kids and how great, you know, how great it's been for them and all these opportunities that they have that they may not have had if they weren't homeschooled, right? But how about as a parent, what have you learned on your own, on this own, you know, home education, homeschooling journey?
You know, I was, when I thought about that question, it's really interesting, because I think for me, the biggest thing is remembering to listen and be watchful of my kids and what they're really enjoying, and not too critical over the things that are difficult for them, but figuring out ways to accomplish the task. Case in point, my son last year was really, he was in a place where he was struggling with math and whatever the concept was. And I'm not the math girl. So, with him, he hasn't taken any of your classes yet. I think my daughter's taken a couple, but he hasn't had the opportunity yet. But in what he was doing, I was like, you know what? We're just pulling out the answer key. And what I did for him, because what I could see is that he couldn't find the logical steps to do next. He could almost get to the answer. You could see it was kind of close. He couldn't get there. And I'm like, you know what? You're going to do problems 1, 3, and 5, or however many, the odd number ones from the answer key. But what I want you to do is do it as copy work. I want you to copy the problem and copy the steps of how to get to the answer, because he couldn't. And it was like horror, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm giving him the answers. Is that the wrong thing to be doing as a parent? I'm just say, here, copy the answers, and then it was like, no, he has to build the logical process for that, for math, for him to understand how he got from the original equation to whatever the answer is supposed to be. And for him, it worked. And so it was really, sitting, and it worked without a whole lot of frustration and anger and sometimes tears, right? With math, especially.
Right.
And so for us, that really worked, because I was not the math person. And I didn't have a tutor in my back pocket that I was paying by the hour to make sure that he did aces in math, And so for us, and it was COVID, and it was crazy time. And so, it was just like, you know what? Let's pull this out and do it this way. So that was intentional in me observing a problem and trying to find a solution that was going to work for both of us. So his learning style, my teaching style, and how those kind of need to work together to accomplish what he needs to be able to pursue his passions. Because if his passions are computer science, he's got to do pretty good at math. And if he's getting stuck and getting frustrated, and the ideas in his head is, I can't do this and I'm horrible and all that kind of thing, that's going to kill it for him. And I don't want that. I want it to produce, him pursuing his passions and being able to undergird that as best I can.
Wow. That's so great.
Yeah.
It's funny because him being interested in computer programming, right? You literally interacted with him like a computer programmer.
Yeah.
Because
I tried
you gave him the code, and that's one of the great the skill sets that computer programmers is one of the things that the technology companies are looking for in a computer program. Can they debug the code? Right. So you're looking at the code, and so you're seeing the solutions and seeing how the whole process is done, right?
Yeah.
And he can figure it out. This is so great, right? It's like perfect to be able to do that. That's awesome.
Well, thank you for validating the way I went about it, because I sat there for a good 5 minutes and I told him, okay, so go take a break. Let me think about this. And I sat there for a good couple minutes, had a cup of coffee, and said, is this the right way to approach this? Or is this the wrong way? Am I letting him off easy? Or is it going to empower him to move forward? And it was the latter.
Absolutely.
It was the latter. So
That's good. Yeah. Our whole courses are, we want students engaged in seeing what they're doing. And
yes.
It was funny. We actually have students go through and look at how we have all the solutions written out, because one of the things, like when we talk about young people and about how we want them to show their work, and it's typically boys, and it's typically they're somewhere between that, 10 and 12 age. You're right. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's like they don't want to show their work. And my own son was like that too. And so we went through the whole thing, but what I realized was that we don't train them in how to show their work. We just tell them to do it. It's like, well, just show your work, right?
Yeah.
Well, if it's not their thing, they're not interested in doing that, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting because in having students be able to see it laid out for them, we're actually showing them what showing your work looks like.
Yeah.
So it's worked out really great. So that's
I
just
think
that's
it's
fun.
really, really a piece. What I identified from my own history and my past, just schooling, just in public school, and you might remember as well, we had the teacher and a chalkboard or a whiteboard up there working the problem so we could watch the steps
Right.
and take
Yeah.
the different numbers and do it on our paper.
Yeah.
And so we were seeing the process. And that once we've moved to like digital education, especially for like math, that was for our family was a little bit of a hurdle to try to replicate that in a way that they could see the steps logically and follow them and actually learn and not be frustrated.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so we've come a long way in technology in the last
Yes,
8
we
years
have,
since we moved here, and we're doing the, the higher maths and that kind of thing
Right.
with the kids. And so, but yeah, that's what it came down to. It's like they need to see it in order to replicate it and understand it. And so it's like, no, just give it to them.
Yeah. Oh, I
We'll
love
call
that.
it copy work.
Yeah.
So
Well, it worked out great. So
yeah,
yeah,
it did.
that's awesome. So is your, you actually still, and you help families now because you've seen the joy. I mean, there's so many words we could say, the joy, the benefit, that, like there's all these different, about using the world as, as your classroom.
Yeah.
And so now you're helping other families to do the same thing. So how do you do that? Like, what is it that you do to help families use the world as their classroom?
Well, okay. So first, I enjoy traveling, and I haven't done it as much in the last 2-3 years as any of us who love to travel would like to. We're getting back there, slowly
Yes.
but surely. And but what I've done is I've created virtual lessons with my world geography curriculum and then my state studies, where you are learning about wherever the location is, using virtual resources, using primarily museums, and then just supplementing with like YouTube videos that are high quality, and sometimes travel sites even,
Right.
to bring the world to them instead of the expense of going to the locations, and making it being everything from the world geography, where we go through 250 countries in the school year, to 1 week state studies, where it's a mini study that you could lengthen out as much as you want. You could, like, if you're going to spend spring break and you're going to go to, let's just say you're going to go to Montana, right, for spring break, you could study Montana before you go on the trip, or when you get back, just to make it a full package of learning that then it's intentional, because it counts as learning, not just vacation.
Right.
And that kind of thing. And so it also, the curriculums also fulfill the state study requirements that every US state has. And I think they still have most states at the upper elementary, middle school, have to do a semester of state study. And so it does fulfill that. So it's really niche for each individual state for homeschoolers that are looking for something to fulfill that requirement, if they want something different than might be provided by the government or something like that.
That's awesome.
So,
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah. They were really fun to put together. So
I bet. Yeah, that's so great. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're researching things like that, and you're like, wow, this is kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So that you've started co-ops before, right? And because oftentimes people look at like, well, what does that take? And I know the pandemic really kind of like put even some of the co-ops started figuring out how to do things online, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And now, many of them are back to in person again, and doing their things and going strong and getting stronger than ever, because homeschooling keeps gaining momentum.
Yeah.
If people are interested in starting a co-op, what would you share with them on, what should they consider, think about?
Well, what I can share is my experience, because my experience is maybe unique, but I had to consider worldviews, and I had to can ask the question about what's our why, what are we passionate about with a group of people that I'm working with, what commonalities do we have, what are our goals, do we have similar goals and purpose in our home education process, those kind of things. But what happened here when I moved to Scotland, I became friends with another North American. She's Canadian, and both of us were like, here in Europe, especially in the UK, the museums are free. The national museums, almost all the museums are free. There are some that are cost, but they're not too much. And they all have great, amazing children's programs. So if you're first through sixth grade, roughly by US definition, first through sixth grade, there are all kinds of resources for that age group. School trips for the public schools, great things. Once you hit secondary school, it all drops off and there's nothing. Nothing that is available like for that older age group, that more critical thinking, that more thought process thinking that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. And so we realized we needed something to provide for our homeschooled teenagers or preteens, our tweens. We already had a museum activity group that met once a month and they did that, but we wanted something that was more traditional co-op style to meet the needs, to provide opportunity to dialogue, to think out loud, to learn public speaking skills, to learn group skills, to do longer art projects or science experiments, and be a community together. Because here in Scotland, homeschooling and home education is more popular than it was 8 years ago, but it still is it's nothing like in the States. And so to find that group of people that you really can connect with and work well together with the same vision was what happened. So those are kind of from a parent level, those are the really big pieces that have been important for us. And so we did that. And then we did that. That's been going, I think, 6 years now.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was really exciting. And then the conference component is that we just over the weekend did our first home education conference here locally in the town that I'm in. And it really was exciting we had like 70 families, which is huge for Scotland to get 70 families because it's so spread out. And, and then there was a snowstorm. So there were people that should have been there that couldn't come because they couldn't get through the snow and different things. But it was such an encouragement because the isolation and the not feeling alone and realizing, you're not absolutely crazy for wanting to do this and that kind of thing when the rest of the community is saying, oh, that's just not the right way to go about it, type of thing. It was really encouraging both for us as facilitators and coordinators, but for the people, it's so exciting to see families with so many questions about how to do it and how to get involved with co-ops and conferences, and, the whole thing.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. It's so great. Wow, it's just and sharing the gifts. It's so great.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So we want to make sure everybody has the ability to get to your site. So it's captivatingcompass.com. Tell us about your courses that you have there that people can find out about. And you have a blog there too, so they can read up on your travels and see what you're up to. Yeah. So there's all kinds of different things. There's oodles of freebies and free printables and stuff. You'll see those in the posts. When it comes to the life skills stuff, we have just, my daughter is working through your study skills course, and that is up there, along with a study skills power bundle, which is just printables. That's kind of an accompaniment to that, to encourage families to teach life skills and study skills, in this case, study skills. My life skills class, I teach at True North currently. And so that's there, and they can find that if they just look for, I think it's maturing with confidence, helping your teens mature with confidence. And that will tell you about the life skills course there. My world geography course is there, and that is self-paced, or you can see the links are there to get it for the live version through True North right now. And so those are both there, as well as the life skills live course as well for True North. I think I just said that though. And then there's the state studies. Right.
So the state studies are there. And then there's even more. One of the first things I created was actually a course for parents, which is how to turn any homeschool curriculum into a family travel adventure. And so,
That's awesome.
so that's there as well. And then one of the things that I've done is when we look at worldview, we often learn, when we're learning physics, we learn Newton's calculations and Newton's laws, and same thing with some other people and that kind of thing. And I have created unit studies that really contextualize the life and history of the individuals, and then like for the science guys, then experiments with them. And so I've done famous scientists, and I've done famous British authors, and I have a unit on Tesla as well, because we just came back from Croatia, so I couldn't help but do Tesla. So but yeah, so we base a lot of the things that I have created have been based on our travels.
Wow.
And that kind of thing. So there's
so
virtual
great.
museum studies, there's unit studies, there's full year curriculum. So, and if I don't have it, just give me an idea and it'll probably happen.
That's so great. All right. So that's captivatingcompass.com. And then if they want to find you on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, it's Captive 8. So no E, but CAPTAV 8 Compass. And we'll put all that in the show notes as well. So super exciting. Oh my gosh. It's so fun to do this and, just hear about your travels and journeys and all the things that you're doing and the difference you're making in, in another country that is just getting what homeschooling is all about. And you're there to kind of pioneer that and help them find their way too. So that's super awesome. So very good.
Well, thank you, Dennis. And I want to say, one of our biggest pieces and one of our biggest hurdles in traveling and using the world as our classroom is digital curriculum. And in Europe, so many people are looking to the US for their curriculum choices. And so many, much more are becoming digital, but there are still so many that are textbooks based and workbook based. And those become so expensive for the Europeans because of the shipping. Primarily, you will pay double the amount. And so those that are doing digital curriculum are my favorites, because we are able to have excellent learning resources without paying somebody else to get them to us. And so and then we can take them with us. We don't have to pack a workbook and a textbook and all those pieces. So thank you so much for what you do with providing the digital curriculums, because they have fit our family needs so well in the classes that we've taken with you guys. And we look forward to many more of those for my son. My daughter's kind of done, but my son is still there going with it. So thank you so much.
And, I'm actually usually in Europe the same time that your convention is. So if you guys do it next year, let me know, because maybe I can pop over, and that would be fun, right?
Definitely. Definitely.
That'd be really fun. Very cool. Well, good. Well, we're going to definitely get back together and do this again, because I think people are going to want to hear more about the travels and what you're up to and what. So this is great. All right, perfect. Well, everyone, thanks for tuning in to A+ Parents. And Shannan, thank you for being here today and making your day work. And everybody, we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. See you then.